This 33-year-old lens might be one of the most underrated lenses in the whole Canon EOS system. So here's my review of the original Canon EF 28mm f2.8. So much like the 50mm video I made, I set up a Lightroom catalog with just a handful of images that I've taken with the 28mm. I'll just kind of rock through these real quick. My whole purpose of this video, just like the 50, is to give you an idea of the variety of images that you can capture with this lens and an idea of the quality. These images range from landscape to street shots and were shot on my 6D and 70D, and I'm not sure if there's any other camera I use, but I know those are the two main cameras. So you'll get an idea of this lens on a crop sensor as well as on a full frame camera. These first few shots are landscape shots taken in northern Nevada. This one's at f5.6 on my 6D. Some of these are edited a little bit. Some I'm still trying to figure out the best edit for these. This is one at f22. These next few I closed the lens down all the way because I wanted to get a little bit of that smooth water look that you get with slightly long exposures. And I didn't have an ND filter. If I had an ND filter, then I probably would have kept the aperture around f11 or so and split the difference, because I feel the sweet spot in this lens is about around f11, and you'll see there's a decent amount of shots in here that are in that range. But these next few are at f22, so I could get a cool look to that water. This shot's at f22 again and is a 2-second exposure. Some of these I knew I was going to convert to black and white. Some I wasn't sure. This one's at f6.3 with a slightly longer exposure because it's nighttime. I did shoot it at 3200, but the 6D can do 3200 pretty cleanly. I like that. I like shooting 3200 with that camera. This is another slightly long exposure at f8 because again I wanted that long exposure, slightly longer exposure for the cool look in the clouds. This one's definitely edited. This one's at f13 again on my 6D, and I guess this might be an opportunity to analyze the sharpness and whatnot. And this is, if you look at the area that's supposed to be in focus, which is those Red Rock Mountains, it's pretty sharp from edge to edge, and there's a decent amount of detail in the center. I'm not really liking the way I edited this one, so I'll probably go back and edit this more, and I can probably enhance the details and the sharpness a little bit as well. Another f22 shot, again, something I would have done differently if I had an ND filter on the lens at the time. I wouldn't have shot it at f22, but it came out pretty good. I wish I had a little more contrast. Maybe I'll do that in an edit. I need more contrast in that water in terms of comparing it to the that brush in the background. Similar situation, although this one I went a faster shutter speed and I'm at f10, so just as a different look. But I liked this shot because I liked the vibe of it. Some of the mist coming, or the fog coming off the water, I thought was really cool. This shot's at f10, 1/60th of a second, ISO 100, again on my 6D, and really strong sharpness and detail in the center, and just an overall cool image. The main thing I wanted to portray in this video with this lens is that it's a great wide angle option at a good value for your film photography and digital photography, especially if you have a full frame like 6D or 5D or something like that. There are great wide angle options throughout the Canon lineup, but this is the one of the least expensive options, and you're not really compromising a ton. If you want wide angle and super wide open aperture, they do have other options. They have 1.8 and 1.8, 1.4 options, but you're going to pay a decent amount more for those. I don't get most of the time I don't get a wide angle lens to shoot wide open. I get a wide angle lens for that field of view, for decent sharpness, and something that gives me the capability to use for landscape, but also as a great walk around lens for street photography. And this lens fits that bill. So these shots coming up are some shots I've taken downtown. If you've watched my videos before, you've seen a decent amount of my shots that I take downtown. It's a place I go to often and like to explore. So here's a couple that I've shot with between the aperture ranges of f8, f11. Just collecting my city vibe shots of downtown Las Vegas. These are all on my 6D so far. Oh, so here's one at 2.8, which is the widest aperture on this lens. I'm not quite sure why I did that on here. Probably because I wanted to stay at ISO 100. So I compensated with the aperture being wide open. And again, the same here. The same thing with this one. Now these next few are night shots. So they're at ISO 3200. So since I was at 3200, I was able to be more flexible with my aperture range on this night. I've said this before, but most of the time when I'm shooting these kinds of shot with my 6D or even my Fujifilm camera, I try to keep it at 3200 because if I'm shooting film, that's the max ISO that I'll go. I won't push, even if I'm shooting 400 speed film, I won't push it past 3200. And if I'm shooting 3200, I usually shoot it at 3200. So I usually treat my digital cameras with a similar mentality. I don't go over 3200. I like to look at that range. So here, these are a few at 3200. So these are at 3200. These El Cortez shots, and actually these are from my 70D. I don't have it anymore, but when I had the 70D, I would shoot with this lens on there off and on. I also had the pancake lens for that camera, but this gives you a good idea of how it looks on a crop sensor. So you still get a slightly wider view than a standard 50 millimeter with this, because this, if you compare a 28 millimeter on a crop sensor, it's still slightly wider than what a 50 millimeter would be on a full frame. So it's a good compromise, and it's a good choice for crop sensor or full frame. So these are all on my 70D, these night shots here. And again, these are two shots that I'm still debating. I shared this one on social media, and I kind of wish I would have shared this one. This is a cool street scene shot. I don't normally do street photography with people in it or search that out, but sometimes I see shots that look really cool, and I have to take advantage. So this is another shot of that memorial that I talked about in my 50 millimeter video with my 6D and the 28 millimeter on a different day than some of those other shots, and gives me a nice wide view, not too wide, so I'm not getting crazy distortion, but wide enough that I could have some leeway on how close I get and how close I frame everything. So that's f10, ISO 400 at 1/800th of a second, and a couple from a trip I did to Missouri with my 6D. And the last shot with my 6D downtown, where I take advantage of the wide angle, and it's at f5, so it's still fairly sharp. And I probably should edit this one. Might look really good in black and white, I think, because I can enhance the contrast a little bit. That's it for the image samples. I just wanted to give you an idea of the variety of images I've captured with this lens. It's another one of the great value lenses that you can find for the Canon system, whether that's shooting on the EOS film cameras or the EOS DSLRs that they offer. And this would probably adapt well to the RF system as well. Here's a look at the lens here. It's pretty compact. It has a focus distance window, so you can, if you're doing manual focus, that comes in handy. So it's a very capable lens for manual focusing as well as autofocus. The cool thing about this on an EOS camera is that when you're doing manual focus, you can double check that you're locked on by pushing that autofocus rear button autofocus. I'm not sure if it works on the shutter button if you have it set there, but if I push that while I'm in manual focus, if I'm locked on, it'll beep in a similar way that it beeps when I do autofocus. So it's a handy little trick if you're using manual focus on a lens like this on your EOS film cameras. So this is what it looks like on my EOS 7, Elon 7. It's pretty compact. I never thought that size of a lens was a big deal to me until I had that 35mm f2.0. And that's a fantastic lens, but compared to this one, it's massive. When I was choosing a camera and lens combo to go out and shoot street photography with, it was a little more tempting to grab the smaller lens. Even if the smaller lens didn't open quite as wide, sometimes I would grab the smaller lens, and the smaller size was a little more convenient. So mentally, I didn't really care about the size of the lens. I just wanted image quality. But there is something to be said about that compromise between lens size and quality and capability. Again, this lens was the first 28mm prime released for the EF system. It came just after the original 50mm lens. So this lens is over 30 years old now, but it holds up today really well. The autofocus is solid. The manual focus is really easy to operate. The image quality is great. Yeah, it doesn't open up beyond 2.8, but again, for most people, and for me definitely, that's not why I buy a lens like this. I buy a lens like this for street photography, a good walk around lens that gives me a decent wide angle without going too extreme, but yet noticeably wider than a 35 and a 50. And I've loved the shots I've gotten with this lens. I actually kind of had to remind myself that this lens was worthy of keeping around and shooting with it more often, because I did go through a period where I was trying so many lenses and I was kind of searching out these perfect lenses, so to speak. I almost sold this lens, and then I was going through a lot of my images, building a photo library for social media, my new website that I'm building, and I started to see a pattern of really cool shots from 28mm, and specifically this one. So it was good for me to do that, because it reminded me that just throw all specs and price and other things out the window and just look at what I've been able to capture. This lens is one of the best ones that I've had in my kit. I wanted to make a video on this lens because I think it doesn't get a lot of play out there. It doesn't get a lot of attention online. There are a couple videos on it, but for anyone getting into film photography and buying some of the cameras I've talked about on this channel, or if you already own some of the cameras or some of the DSLRs from Canon, this is a lens that I would give a serious consideration to if you need something wider than a 50 or a 35. On KEH, as of right now, there's one on there for about 170. Excellent condition. That's the top end of the price range currently that I feel I'm seeing. eBay's around between 120 to 170, still within that price range. And I think UsedPhotoPro had one for about 130. So between 120 and 170, you're gonna find you're gonna be able to find these in decent shape, and in that price range is totally worth it. So that's pretty much it of my review of the Canon 28mm f2.8, the original. I strongly suggest you consider this if you need an affordable wide-angle lens for your Canon EOS film camera or your Canon DSLR. It's less than $200, less than $150 oftentimes, and it gets you a great street photography and landscape lens that's really sharp, has a lot of detail, and is a great addition to your kit. So one quick note I didn't mention because I didn't have a lot of shots to show you is that at f2.8, without any corrections, there is a little bit of vignetting. You can usually adjust for that little vignetting that happens at 2.8 pretty easily. But that's the only obvious so-called downside or negative that I deal with this lens, is that occasional vignetting. So let me know if you have this lens. If not, let me know if you're thinking about picking up this lens, and if you do buy it, show me some of the images that you're shooting with. And that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I have over 100 subscribers now, which to me that's pretty awesome considering it was just a few months ago I had like 7. So thank you very, very much for liking, watching, and commenting, and I'll talk to you soon.